Morning guys, welcome back to the channel. Okay, in today's video it's a return to the instructional guitar series that we're building, and we're going to talk about the theory of the fretboard in relation to where we actually place our bar chords. So our E-shaped bar chords, our A-shaped bar chords. It's all very well knowing how to play them, and I'll link to my video from a few months ago where we talked about the mechanics of actually forming bar chords and making them work. But what if we don't know what to do with them? Okay, so we're going to talk about where we would place them on the neck and what names there will be. Okay, so let's dig into it. And if you think this is going to be interesting, please like the video and subscribe to it because it really helps the channel out. Now, I think what you'll find is that if you're like a lot of beginner or even intermediate guitarists, you've learned how to play a bar chord, how to make them sound, but actually there's still a bit of a mystery surrounding where we actually place them. Now, today we're going to address this. We're going to talk about two types of bar chord. We're going to talk about E-shape or E family bar chords, and we're going to talk about A-shape or A family bar chords. So, to be clear, here is a chord of E or a chord of E minor, and here is a chord of A or a chord of A minor. Now, this is important. With an E chord or an E minor chord, you'll probably know that we strum all 6 strings, starting from the 6th string, which is the E string. The open 6th string is a note of E. And it might not be apparent to you, though it probably will be, that when we play a chord of E or E minor, the starting note, the root note or the bass note of the chord is that 6th string. That's where we start our strum from. And then, when we look at chords of A or A minor, we actually only play 5 strings because the open 5th string, this one, is a note of A. And in the chord of A or A minor, or indeed any other type of A chord, we want the bass chord, the bass note, sorry, to be a note of A. And we play that by starting it from the open A string. And that is the key relationship that we need to establish. And it's the key to the rest of this video. So let's start with E chords. And when I say E chords, I mean the family of E chords, so anything with an E in the name. So E, E minor 7, E7, there's a few more. We're just going to focus on E and E minor because they'll be the most common ones. So, at the 1st fret, open position, the bass note is E, and because the bass note is E of this E shape, this E template, it's called an E chord or an E minor chord. Now, we know how we play a chord of F. We take the E shape, we switch the fingers round, so our first finger's free, and we move it 1 fret higher, and we replace the nut, this plastic bit, with our first finger. Now, looked at in isolation, that is still an E shape. That is still an E minor shape, but of course we've moved it. It's not going to be called E anymore, but what is it called? Well, put our first finger down to make it a bar. Now you probably know that that is a chord of F, but why is it a chord of F? This is the point. When it was a chord of E, the open E gave it its name of E. Now we move an E template or an E shape up 1 fret, we've changed the root note, and the 1st fret on the E string is a note of F. And that's why it's a chord of F. Here it was a chord of E because the bass note was an E. We could call that an E shape E. Move it up, it's an E shape, but it's not called E anymore because we've changed the bass note on the E string to be an F. So we could call that an E-shaped F. If we went up another fret, the note on the E string is now F sharp, and we're referencing the E string, remember, because we're using an E shape, and because we're using an E template, an E-shaped chord, The name is taken from the E string. Remember, E template, E string. I know I keep reinforcing that, but that's where people in my lessons get confused. That note, 2nd fret E string, makes this E shape an F sharp, because the 2nd fret on the E string is an F sharp. So you could call that an E shape or an E shaped F sharp. If I were to make an E minor, same thing happens. E minor, there's an F, E minor shaped F minor, F sharp minor. Let's go, I don't know, let's go to the 7th fret. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, there we go. Now, the 7th fret on the E string, that is a note of B. So if I put my bar down so that the E string is playing a B, because it's at the 7th fret, and because I'm using the E string, I'll fill the chord in with an E shape. That's now an E shape B. Or if I make it the E minor shape, that's an E minor shaped B minor. We don't move it to make it minor. Some people move it back and think they've made it minor. Well, no, because remember, there's 2 parts to a chord name. There's the letter, which in this case is E or F sharp, or we've moved to the 7th fret, so it's B. And then the flavour of the chord, major or minor, is given by the rest of the E-shaped template that we're putting on. So if we want a B major, which you would normally just call B, we put an E major or just an E chord on, and that gets renamed as B because the root note on the E string, remember E shape, E string, is a B. Make it an E minor shape, move it up to the 7th fret, give it its new name from the E string, E minor. So that's the relationship. E shapes or E template chords take their name from where the bar is on the E string. Okay, now, what about A? Well, remember, here's an A shape, and the root note is on the 5th string. So, what if I were to move that to, say, the 5th fret? So I put my bar down on the 5th fret, fill in the rest of the A shape, and remember we have to leave a gap because the normal A was at the 2nd fret, so put our bar at the 5th fret. Now on the A string, on the 5th string, on the A string, that note that the bar is playing is a D. So if I put my A shape down, that's now an A shape D. And here's the link. A shape or A template, name comes from where the bar is on the A string. What if I make it an A minor shape? Well, the name is still from the A. You have to forgive the guitar for being out of tune, but the theory still stands. Move that up so that the root note, i.e. the bar, is playing a D, because on the A string it's a D at the 5th fret. That now becomes an A minor shaped D minor. It's an A minor shape, but it's not A minor anymore, it's D minor, because on the A string it's now a note of D. What about putting it to the 2nd fret? Here's my A minor, there's my root note, open A string, 2nd fret on the A string, well that's a B, so that's now an A minor shape, but it's not A minor anymore because we've moved it, the root note on the 5th string, on the A string, because an A minor shape, A string, it's now a B, so it's B minor. Now, you now know every chord. Crazy. And you'll also realise that you can play them in several places. So we can find a B at the 7th fret on the E string, and because it's the E string we use an E shape, so that's E minor shape B minor, we'll just call it B minor. But there's also a B on the 2nd fret on the A string, and because it's A string we'll put an A minor shape down, that becomes B minor. So it's actually the same chord, okay, it's different pitch. Now what we're going to do is we need to learn the names of the notes. That's the whole key to the guitar really, knowing the names of the notes on the E string and the A string. For future videos we'll talk about what else we can do with those in terms of soloing and lead work and things like that, but for now start opening up your knowledge of the fretboard and learn the notes on the E string and the A string. So what I'll do is we'll put a graphic in of the notes on the E and the A string. You'll probably find you already know some. We know the open E is E, so it's chords of E. Probably already know F, so you know the first fret note on the E string. G is 3rd fret. Think about what a normal G is. Well, that's actually your root note on a normal G. But we can put the bar down there on the E string. Now that would be E-shaped Gs. At the 5th fret, on the E string, it's an A, which is the same as the 5th string. And on the A string, it's a D, which is the same as the 4th string. So we can remember that. So we already know E, F, G, A. Remember B at the 7th fret, and we're halfway there. A string, B at the 2nd fret, you may well already know B minor, but perhaps didn't know why it was that. C is at the 3rd fret, because the root of a chord is C. D, same as the D string. And then on the 5th string at the 7th fret, it's an E. So we already know to the 7th fret there. So let's just workshop that, shall we? Bar at the 7th fret, A string, 5th string, A string is an E, note, put an A chord on. Because it's an A chord, the root is taken, or the name is taken from the A string, so that's an A-shaped E, or an A minor shaped E minor. So it can be confusing, to be fair, because you're going to be thinking, well, you know, what am I thinking? What am I doing? What notes am I looking at? What string is my root on? Don't make it more complicated than it is. Okay, so here's the rules again. You can play an E-shaped chord or an E minor shaped chord or any other chord from the E family, but those E templates, place them anywhere with a bar, and because it's an E shape, what is the name of the note on the E string? And that becomes the name of the chord. Similarly for A shapes or A minors or any other A's, but we'll just talk about A and A minor because they're the most common. Wherever you place them, because it's from the A family of chords, the name comes from the A string. So remember, E template, name from the E string, A template, name from the A string. So I hope that's kind of clear. So when I teach my students, we often go over this 2 or 3 times because they get themselves in a bit of a pickle. When we have a lesson, they go away and think about it and practice it and come back, and there can be some misunderstandings. So feel free, write questions in the comments. If you want me to go over any of it again, then I can do a follow-up video to it. The most important thing though, if you're playing an E-shaped chord, the name comes from the E string where the bar is. If you're playing an A-shaped chord or any of the A-shaped chords, the name comes from what the note is on the A string. So learn those root notes on the E and A string and you're nearly there. So I hope that's been useful. As I say, if you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel and check out the other instructional videos we've got. We're also going to do reviews and just general videos on my life as a musician. But in the meantime, thanks very much for watching today, guys. It's been a pleasure as ever, and I'll catch up with you soon. Cheers then. Bye.